Welcome to Crimepedia podcast. I am your host this week. My name is Cherry, and with me, as always, is the man in the cape. It is Morgan.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi, Cherry. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. This is my favourite day of the year. Next Christmas, but Halloween is my favourite. I love it.
I know. Is Halloween becoming a bigger thing? Is Halloween becoming a bigger thing over there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, most of my friends have got like pumpkins out. Quite a lot of my friends have dressed up. Like last night, a lot of people went out last night to do Halloween stuff. So I think it's getting a bit bigger here. Not as big as it is in America, but I love it. I love that. I love it all. It's brilliant fun. Oh no, I can't hear you.
No, it is a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed Halloween, and I think I'm going a little extra this year with Halloween and decorations. So we'll see. We'll see how the kids like my decorations when it's time for trick or treat.
I love it. Well, if you've got Instagram, I put a picture of my dog. I Halloweened up my dog this week. He was not impressed. He was grumpy with me afterwards. He just give me the death stare and was like, "I don't think so. We're not doing this ever again." Well, this week we have a bit of a treat for you because we decided we wanted to do something Halloween-ish. So we've decided we're going to do something which Morgan has very cleverly named Trick or True Crime. And one of us has got a real case for you, which would be the true crime case. And the other one has got an AI generated case, so a fake case. And that one is our trick case. So we're going to get you to guess which one is a real case and which one is the trick case. And we're going to give you the answer next week so that you can have a play around with this one. We thought it might be a bit of fun just for Halloween.
Yeah. Yes, it should be a lot of fun. And I'm very interested to see what we've come up with this week, and hopefully our listeners enjoy this.
Well, we're normally very serious, and this is, of course, they are serious cases, but we are normally very serious, and we thought we would just give you a real case, which is a serious one, and then something that's a bit of fun. See if you can tell the difference between the two. Are you going to start, or shall I start? What do you want to do?
I'll start. So let's get this trick or true crime started with a true case. So I'm going to give you this true case. Wink, wink, or maybe it's not. And we'll see what you think. All right. So this is a case that actually occurred back actually when we were young teenagers. I think we were probably 14 or 15. So this was the Halloween night of 1994 in Willow Creek, which is a neighborhood that is nestled within the heart of Portage, Indiana, which is it's like in the northwest corner of Indiana, not too far from Chicago, I believe. So northeast corner, kind of close to Lake Michigan, in between Chicago and in the state of Michigan, roughly. Okay. So Portage that year was obviously alive with festive energy. Families bustled with activity. They would be adjusting costumes, preparing candy bowls, and setting up last-minute decorations. Carved pumpkins flashed their eerie grins from every porch, and makeshift graveyards sprouted in the front yards. Now, at the Mitchell home, 7-year-old Tommy was obviously very excited to go out trick-or-treating. For this Halloween, he had chosen to dress as the Green Power Ranger, and he was absolutely thrilled to be his favorite Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. And he had actually been rehearsing his karate kicks and jumps for days.
Oh, bless him.
Much to the amusement of his parents, but obviously it annoyed his older sister. So he had an older sister named Jenny who just found his antics to be a little too much, So when she was 12 years old, so she was 5 years older than Tommy. Yeah, I mean, anytime your little brother is in your face and
no
doing karate, you're going to be irritated. Oh,
yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. This was actually the first year that Tommy and Jenny's parents were letting them go out alone. So Jenny was in charge of Tommy to make sure that to take him around, to go trick-or-treating, to make sure he was okay, that he wasn't doing anything dumb, and he wasn't trying to do karate kicks out in the middle of the street, the typical thing that 7-year-olds would do. Now that year, Jenny wanted to be a little bit more sophisticated, and she
Okay.
went with a more mature look. She just went as a witch, which she didn't want to go as like the typical like kids type costumes. I don't know, like 1994. That might have been like the last year that I went trick or treating, I think. And I'm trying to remember. I mean, when we were little, a lot of the costumes um were like plastic. So you'd have like a plastic jumper or like one piece
Yeah.
suit, like, and you have the plastic mask. But I don't know, like I can't remember what I went as that year. It's probably something like really dumb because obviously if I was like 13 or 14, I probably wanted to be like cool. I didn't want to wear like some dorky costume. So I
I
was
think
probably
at
like,
14, I probably went out as like a sexy witch or something, or a devil or something, PVC devil or something at 14.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jenny decided like, I'm just gonna go as this sophisticated witch type character. Obviously, she went out with the hopes of trying to impress her friends, and was hoping that her
Yeah.
costume might, get her some extra candy here and there. Their parents were Helen and Mike Mitchell, and they remember watching their children excitedly prepare for Halloween that year. Helen was a school teacher, and she has recalled that she like at the time she was just reminiscing about past Halloweens, not only like her children's past Halloweens, but Halloweens that she could recall as a child.
Mm.
Now, Mike, the dad, he was a local journalist, and that evening he was actually taking candid photos of their kids for their family album. So he was very, very fond of taking pictures. He always had a camera with him at these type of events or these holidays. So he was just trying to get as many photos as he could. Now, as the sun began to set, transforming the sky into shades of purple and gold, Tommy and Jenny, along with their two of their friends, Sarah and Brian Stewart, set out bags in hand, ready to fill them to the brim with treats. Now, the first few houses went as expected, with Tommy enthusiastic Power Ranger moves earning a few extra candies here and there. But as the night wore on, the group was drawn to a particular house they hadn't visited before. Word spread within the neighborhood of this extravagant Halloween display that was at the home owned by Henry Larkins. This was actually like a few blocks over from their intended path that evening. With elaborate decorations, spooky music, and even a mini haunted house or haunted maze, it was really the highlight of the Willow Creek neighborhood that year. So everyone wanted to go to this house and check it out. Jenny was trying to balance her protective instincts with I guess you would call it like the typical preteen desire to fit in with her friends.
Yeah.
So she allowed the group to change their planned route. Now, as they approached the Larkins house, they were memorized by the elaborate display. Jenny got caught up chatting with Sarah about school gossip, and they really quickly lost track of Tommy.
Oh no.
So they went through the maze, and when they got out, Tommy's absence became evident. So at that point, they knew something was wrong. Tommy wasn't with them. He didn't come out of the maze. They didn't know where he was.
Oh, she's going to be
Obviously,
in trouble.
big time trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
So panic quickly set in within the group, and they started to immediately search the area.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they didn't ask for any assistance, so they didn't ask the Larkins if they had seen Tommy. They would just
Oh
kind of went out on their
no.
own, like, we're gonna be able to find them. So they retraced their path and where they were, hopefully, like thinking like, okay, maybe he saw some other houses that he wanted to stop to get some candy at. Maybe he saw some friends.
Well,
So
because
they
if the adults
backtracked
don't
to try to.
know, if the adults don't know that he's gone
Mhm.
missing, they're not going to get in trouble. So they're going to try and find him first
Exactly.
before they actually admit to an adult that they can't find him. Because you're
No,
going to be in deep
absolutely.
trouble when you can't find your little brother.
Exactly. No. So they backtracked. Unfortunately, they didn't find him anywhere.
Oh, no.
Even though they had hope that maybe he just wandered off, that he might just be
Yeah.
close by. They checked pretty much every nearby house. They retraced their steps, and obviously this caused Jenny to have this great sense of dread.
Yeah.
Now by the time Jenny reached her home, she was breathless and teary-eyed, and her
Oh.
parents immediately understood how serious the situation was. Within hours, a massive search operation was underway in the area. The local police obviously were alerted, and by midnight, a search party had formed. Uh, in a community like this, news spreads very, very fast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of people within the neighborhood were out searching for Tommy. Actually, some families from neighboring towns and cities actually came and helped out with the search. Hoping that they would be able to find any sort of sign of him.
Yeah.
The police would comb through pretty much every inch of Willow Creek and its surrounding areas. Once this actually hit the news, the local news, the sight of Tommy in his Power Ranger costume. It was actually one of the photos that his dad had taken earlier in the evening would start to be prominently featured in local news reports. And obviously anyone that saw this was just devastated that Tommy was now missing. I think we talk about this a lot. So Portage is a small town, and they are absolutely not accustomed to things like this. So
yeah,
they did what they could. They put their officers out. They had pretty much all the units out 24/7 trying to search for him, but it really wasn't enough for them. This was a much bigger deal than their tiny police force could handle. So they did reach out to neighboring precincts for help, which they obviously, sent out whatever they could. Detective Richard Lane, he was a seasoned officer from the nearby city of Valparaiso, was appointed to lead the investigations. Now, as the search investigation unfolded, many people in the area began to suspect that Henry Larkin, who was the owner of the haunted maze house, was involved in Tommy's disappearance. Okay.
Really?
Obviously, well, yeah, they did. So he was the last. I mean, this was the last place that they were heading towards before Tommy's disappearance. So yeah, obviously, people were gonna be like, okay, so what if Tommy got, if this guy was involved in Tommy's disappearance, maybe Tommy was there and something happened and I don't know, but a lot of people in the area thought he could have been involved. Part of this was because he was considered somewhat of a recluse, and he was known to have a strained relationship with his family and had a history of odd behavior.
Okay.
So he was the type of guy that would go. It was weird because like they consider him a recluse, but at the same time he is putting up these elaborate displays, right? So I don't know if those really go hand in hand with each other.
No.
Now with odd behavior, I know that people stated that. So he was the type of guy that would. I think he enjoyed like scaring kids, especially like on Halloween. So so his way of spreading holiday cheer, especially for Halloween, is to be kind of put on this creepy type of character for the neighborhood. And I think that kind of like it started to like not become who he was, but that's what people began to see him as, right?
Yeah.
He's this recluse, kind of odd guy that
bit weird.
It's a bit weird, right? Now, he was investigated by the police, but after a thorough investigation, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. So let's get that straight. So he didn't have anything involved with it. There was no evidence to even suggest that Tommy actually made it to the house. We do know what he was doing at the time. He wasn't alone, obviously. So he had a wife, and he actually had kids. Kids weren't there, but the wife actually was able to give him an alibi that they were together handing out candy. And so there's no way that he would have been able to grab Tommy, have him disappear and then not, so there's no way that he did it. Okay.
Well, unless they did it together and unless she was involved too, because that happens. Look at Myra Hindley.
I mean, it could.
Her husband. Yeah.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So like Jenny and Sarah and Brian went to the maze, right? They got candy from them.
They were,
so how are they handing out candy but yet Tommy is missing? I mean, are they going to snatch Tommy and like I don't know, throw him in a basement and then
Well,
still
you'd
be there
worried
to
that
be
he
able.
would be hurt somewhere, because his sister's not really paying attention to him. So you'd be worried that
Mhm.
maybe he's hurt himself, and he's.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
would be thinking maybe maybe he's hurt himself. Maybe someone's taken him in because he's hurt, and
Uh-huh.
now he doesn't know where he is. And what about that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, but here's the thing: if he did get hurt, like I mean, one of the big worries about Halloween, especially like in neighborhoods, is kids getting hit by cars, right? Especially when it gets dark.
Yeah, yeah,
So is it
yeah,
is it possible that he got hit by a car and then someone's trying to give him aid? Yeah, I mean that's possible. But you would think that someone would have heard or seen something if that was the case, right?
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think you can like in these type of neighborhoods with with the amount of people out that you could you know hit a kid hit with a car and like not be
and no
seen or
one
no one would.
noticed. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is it possible that he got hurt at trying to get some candy at a house? Like I don't know, was he doing a karate kick and fell
yeah,
I don't know, and someone like took him inside? Yeah, but like, what's the chances that that's going to happen with at someone's house who has really bad intentions?
yeah. That's true.
So I don't know. Now there was a little bit of glimmer of hope when a man by the name of Dale Kirkland, he was a gas station attendant, reported seeing a boy fitting Tommy's description. Now he recalled the boy appearing dazed and being led into the gas station by a man that he did not recognize. The only problem is that at the time there was no surveillance footage available to confirm his claims, and
Right.
there was also no other witnesses that could concur that this happened. So there was no other witnesses to the sighting, and so this lead actually ended up going cold. So I mean, is it possible that this did happen? Yeah, I think so, but without any real evidence, it's kind of. I mean, I don't know how much you can actually do with it.
But also, I hope they looked into him thoroughly because that would be a good cover story. Oh,
Oh
yeah, I saw
yeah,
him being led away by
yeah,
some other guy when actually it was the gas station attendant that did it.
right. And to be honest, I don't know. Like, there's not a whole lot of information about this guy
Yeah.
or what he was doing. So I can't even tell you if he actually was working that night. But yeah, I mean, to me, I would definitely like look into him just
Yeah.
to see, like, check his background, see, actually try to confirm his statement, right? Was he actually
Yeah.
working that night?
That's right.
So, um, I mean, he's definitely, for me, he would definitely be a person of interest.
Oh, yeah.
There were some other people of interest that were looked into, and one was he actually, I wasn't able to find his name, but so I'm going to just say he's an unnamed suspect.
Yeah.
This one is really interesting to me. So this was a man who had recently been released from prison. Okay, he had a history of child related crimes
Oh,
and
no.
was actually seen in the vicinity that evening. Okay,
Yeah.
he became a prime suspect, especially after this witness statements from Dale Kirkland about a boy fitting Tommy's
Yeah.
description being led in by a familiar man. So he supposedly fit the description that Dale Kirkland gave police. Okay.
Right.
The problem with this one is he actually had a solid alibi, which police have stated that this confirmed that he was not involved in the disappearance. But but I don't know. Like, how can you? I mean, he's a really strong suspect, right? He recently released from prison, history of child related crimes. He matches the description given by Dale Kirkland.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the alibi is. There's not a whole lot about the alibi that I
Was
was
he
able
in
to
the
find.
area at the time then?
Yes. So there
Oh.
were witnesses that stated that they believed that he was in the area at the
Yeah.
time. Yes.
It's not looking good for him.
So no, but it's weird that he was cleared. He seemingly was cleared by police based off of an alibi.
But the thing is, I think
But
but you're going to have, the problem is when something like that happens, if there's like a guy that's been released from prison and his charges were rape, they're going to look at him straight away. So, like with this one, there's a kid that's gone missing, and this person who's been in prison, who's just been released, has got kid related crimes. Everyone's going to think it's him straight
mhm,
away anyway. You're not going to be able to get away from that. So,
Right.
it's not looking good for him because everyone's going to think it's him anyway.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. To me, I mean, I can't blame him. That would be my first person I would suspect,
Well, of
especially if I knew
course.
he was in the area, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, there was another person who was a suspect, and it was Gary Simons. Now, he was a local teenager with a notorious reputation for pranks and other minor thefts.
Oh, okay.
Um, Now, some neighbors reported seeing him lurking near the Larkins' house that evening. However, there's no concrete evidence linking him to Tommy's disappearance, and he actually was brought in for questioning by police, but he ended up being released without any charges.
Oh dear.
So, is it possible that this teenager, was trying to do a harmless prank or something and ended up hurting Tommy? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe something went wrong.
I don't know. Obviously, months turned into years, and the pain of not knowing what happened to Tommy weighed very heavily on the Mitchells. Every lead,
And
every
his
tip, every possible,
sister as well.
and
His
his
sister must
sister.
feel awful. She must feel
Oh,
so
yeah.
bad. Because if ever you've been in charge of like looking after your brother or sister, your younger brother or sister, and they fall and they hurt
Mhm.
themselves, even though it's not seriously, you feel so bad. So for your brother to go
Yep.
missing, like when you're supposed to be
Mhm.
looking after him, how do you ever get over that? That's
Well,
harsh.
here's the thing. So I don't want to say if there's if a good thing came out of this because I don't. You, that would be wrong of me to say. But I can tell you that when after this happened, Jenny actually has said that after it happened, it her life mission to seek justice. So
Right.
she ended up actually earning her degree in criminal justice.
Good for
And
her.
since then, she has actually worked with various agencies. She actually does speaking tours, so she actually shares Tommy's story,
Yeah.
and it's like she's even today she's like um, making it so that Tommy's life and Tommy's story remains alive within the public consciousness. So
Yeah.
she hasn't forgotten it, and she has taken what happened and she's turned it into a positive.
Yeah.
So she's still dedicated to finding out what happened to her brother and to
Oh,
actually getting
sad.
justice for his
Yeah.
disappearance.
Sad.
Um, the family did move out of the Portage area. Just I don't blame them. It's just too hard, especially when it comes around Halloween time. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're handing out candy, and could you imagine like how big were the Power Rangers like around, in the mid 90s? Could you
Oh,
imagine
yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
sure
The
there were a
ne
ton of
yeah.
Power Rangers every year coming up to your door, saying trick or
Yeah.
treat, and it's
That
just
must be
it's going to be a
horrible.
reminder. Yeah. So they ended up moving out of the Portage area. They relocated to out to the country, and they have lived there ever since. So, um,
Wow.
yeah, it's a
That's sad.
sad story. We
That's
don't
really
know.
sad.
We don't know what happened to Tommy. Um, Hopefully, one day we can get answers, and the family can have a little bit of peace of mind and a little bit of justice.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that one. That was really interesting, actually. I hope his sister reaches out and gets some good work done with that. I'm sure she does, but it must be horrible to relive the story over and over and over again all the time.
Hmm.
It must be horrific for her. I don't envy
Yeah,
her for
how
that.
can I don't know. I don't know. Like I don't know
But people do it. There are
families
case,
do it. Like
there are cases where families do that, isn't there? Well, there's a few cases where families have gone on to, open up. Like the Susie Lamplugh Trust, they've gone on to open up a
oh
whole
yeah.
trust in the name of
Hmm.
their daughter and their sister. And we met Susie Lamplugh's brother at CrimeCon. And funnily enough, I actually just did a training. Did a training exercise with the Susie Lamplugh Trust, and so her
Oh
death has
wow.
gone on to spur some fantastic training sessions and stuff. And of course that doesn't replace the fact that they're waiting for news on their sister and on their daughter and stuff, but there are
Yeah.
good things being done in her name, which it must be a little bit of comfort for them.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. This has to be a horrible time of year for them, and like I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know how you could. and you just everything is right now. Everything is Halloween, and
I'd go
talking
away if it
about
was me. I
Halloween,
think I
and
think
just
I'd go away
you'd
Halloween
have
time.
to,
Yeah. I
yeah,
don't think I could stay at home because you imagine if somebody comes in and things go round in circles. If a kid comes up to you and they're in a Power Rangers outfit, now even it'd still be something that would just you would be able to feel the pain. That would be awful. Be really sad.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, right. Well, I'll give you my case then. So it was November the
Okay.
1st, 1963, and Ada
Hmm.
Ridley was on her way to see her cousin Catherine, who lived at Goldspink Lane in Sandyford in Newcastle in the north of England. Now, Catherine Lillian
Okay.
Armstrong was 70 years old. She was a retired schoolmistress. She had worked at Denton Road Primary School, but had been retired since 1957. She'd never been married, and she lived alone in this. It's quite a big house, actually. It's called Doncaster House. It's still there, but I don't know if anybody lives in it, but I could find it on the map, so it's still actually there. She'd lived there all of her life, the whole of her life, in the same house, and she was known to her friends and to her family as Lillian, so she went by her middle name. She was a really independent woman. She was a devout Methodist, and she was an active part of the local church and the choir. She had been part of this choir for more than 35 years. She
Oh
didn't have a
wow.
big circle of friends. She kind of kept herself to herself, and the actual, if you could call them friends, they mainly consisted of the people that she would see at choir practices every week. Now,
Right.
Ada would regularly visit her cousin. That morning, she went to the house, knocked on the door several times, but there was no answer. She noticed that the curtains were shut and the property seemed to be in darkness, which was really weird because this was at like 10:30 in the morning. And Lillian was
Hmm.
usually the sort of person who was up and about early, kind of getting on with things and getting on with her day. So Ada kept
Yeah.
knocking. She became more concerned, and so eventually called the local police to come and do like a welfare check and come and have a look at the property. So when police arrived with the consent of Ada, they forced entry into Lillian's property. Now, a police sergeant, the one that actually gained the access, went through into the property and sadly found a very gruesome sight.
Mm.
Lillian's body was at the bottom of the stairs in the passageway. She had been
Hmm.
stabbed around her face and her head 28 times, and she had a nylon stocking tied around her neck. Now, a post-mortem found that she had defense wounds to her hands, suggesting that she had put up a fight against her attacker. Now, the scene was horrific. The scene was very heavily bloodstained, and the blood was traipsed all around the house. Obviously, back then, they knew about blood groups, but nobody knew about DNA. So, obviously, DNA analysis was unavailable. And on such a hugely heavily soaked scene, you can't test every single little bit of blood data. It's too big of a
Yeah.
job. You can test one, but it's spread around the whole house. So there's no way they're going to be able to test every single little bit of blood that's there. Now,
Okay.
looking
Yeah.
at the scene, there was no forced entry into the house. There were no signs of sexual assault on Lillian's body, no signs of the house being ransacked. There was no murder weapon and no suspects that immediately sprang to mind. So again, like you said earlier, the local police didn't deal with stuff like this magnitude.
Right. So okay, you said the house didn't appear that it had been ransacked.
No.
Was there signs of like a serious struggle or anything? Or like
Only
was everything
no.
in place?
Yeah, no, everything was in place. There wasn't anything, nothing was upended. There was no no nightstand that had been knocked over, nothing. I mean, she was on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. As you sort of come into the hallway, there's the stairs like on the
Hmm.
left as you look, and she was on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. And there's nothing really around her to be knocked over, but there was nothing. She obviously had struggled because at the time they couldn't tell because there was so much blood. But when she went and had a post mortem, they found defensive wounds on her hands. So she obviously had put up a fight against the person. But it
Yeah.
makes you wonder, did she know the person because there'd been no forced entry? So had she let that person in, or had she
Right.
opened the door to somebody, or was the door just unlocked and she's, because we're talking back in the 60s, had she left the door unlocked and somebody had come in through?
Mm.
It's
Interesting.
possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the local police, like I said, hadn't been involved in a case like this before. It was very upsetting, obviously, to the officer that managed to get in, and very upsetting to Ada, who was waiting outside. Because obviously now, as soon as he got in there and saw that, all hell broke loose. And you know what it's like when you go to a crime scene and the police enter first. Obviously, they make you wait outside, which he did, made her wait outside. He went in to check through
Mhm.
things first. Obviously, he's then faced with a pretty horrific sight, and then goes out and obviously alerts his other detective colleagues. Now,
Right.
basically what they do, the detective that went the policeman that went in, he obviously comes out, speaks to his colleague, but the detectives at the local station hadn't dealt, like I said, they hadn't dealt with a case like this. So what happened was they went to Scotland Yard, and they had a guy called Detective Superintendent Eric Reed, who was nicknamed Jock, and he was the Scotland Yard murder squad. He travelled up to
Okay.
Tyneside that evening, and they initially focused on trying to piece together the last 16 hours of Lillian's life. There were some witnesses that had seen her. She was last seen alive by two children who saw her looking out of her window at around 6:30 that evening. Now we're talking, this is Halloween. This is 31st of October. Her cousin Ada said that she had been due to attend the choir meeting at 7:30 that evening. But when detectives went and spoke to the church choir, they found that she actually didn't turn up. So we know that these kids saw that they last saw her at 6:30, and by 10:30 the next morning, Ada's knocking on her door and can't get hold of her. So we know that that's the sort of, there's that window there between 6:30 and evening, if you can believe the kids and their timeline, between then and in the morning. The murder weapon was nowhere to be found, so officers started searching drains, pipes, litter bins. They believed it to be a long-bladed knife, and they
Mhm.
thought that perhaps the intruder would have run and would have discarded this weapon. The other thing was that they were worried that because this was Halloween evening, the 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 perpetrator would have been covered in blood. The scene was so bloody that unless they got changed
Oh
at the
yeah.
scene and walked out, they would have been covered in blood. But had it been, because it was Halloween, people probably wouldn't have even noticed that someone was covered in blood. They'd never think it was real blood.
Oh. E- Even back then, like in
Yeah.
1963, like
Yeah.
how popular was it? Would have been then? I mean,
I reckon probably more kids did Halloween stuff than they do now back then in
yeah.
small
But
communities, I
I'm assuming.
reckon.
I mean, my thought would be that this would have been a grown adult, right? That's my map.
I
Some
agree.
who
Yeah,
committed
I
the crime
know.
would
I
have been an
agree with
adult.
you. Yeah,
So
I
in
agree.
1963, how many grown adults are walking around blood soaked on Halloween?
Well, yeah, maybe not very many, but would you really take much notice? It's not like they're going to be glaringly
Mm,
obvious walking towards you like a zombie. It's going to be somebody who's like mixing in and amongst, just walking around. So could it be that they didn't even think about it because it was Halloween, didn't pay any attention? I mean, it's Halloween now. So
maybe, but
if you're walking along with your child Halloween and some bloke is across the road covered in blood, you wouldn't necessarily stare straight at him because everybody's out and everybody's dressed up, and it's not
mm,
really out of the ordinary to see somebody dressed up.
it it wouldn't. But I guess it would depend on the amount of blood on this person,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
if it's like a little bit of blood, like oh look, he has a little like a bloody shirt, or whatever. But if he's like drenched in blood, like blood all over, blood on his
Yeah.
hands, on his face,
Yeah.
that would while it might blend in, it would still stand out to you, right? I mean,
But then we're
like
also
even now.
but then we're talking about, like, it's this time of year, so it is dark outside now. So we're talking about this
Mhm.
time of year. Would you really notice if he's in dark
Oh, okay.
clothing? Would you notice that he's covered in blood? Possibly not.
Yeah, because my first thought now is if I saw an adult walking around like with like blood all over his hands and body and
Yeah.
shirt and clothes, even if I didn't think that okay, oh this guy, if I wasn't thinking in my head, oh this guy just killed someone, my first thought would be
Yeah.
how is this guy gonna get all this off of his body? He's gonna be like stained, so that would stick in my head,
Yeah.
you know?
But, like, I'm thinking if the person's wearing dark clothing, you wouldn't necessarily see the
You
blood
wouldn't know,
unless it was on his hands or
right?
face. So that would be
Exactly,
the only
no, that's
way
true.
that, and I mean, back then, what if you put a pair of gloves on over his hands? Then you'd be
Hmm.
thinking, okay, so what's going to be showing? Just his face?
Yeah. Here's the other thing too. We don't know what time the murder actually
No,
occurred, so it could have
no, we
happened.
don't.
It could have. happened later after all
Yeah.
the festivities have wind down. Maybe there's no one on the street, so
Yeah. Could have been early
being
hours
able
of
to
the
get out of the
morning.
house, getting out of the house,
Yeah.
walking away, it'd be easier to get away without being seen.
So Ada, the cousin, she said she'd previously begged Lillian to leave this big house because all of it, obviously her family, her parents and everybody had died around her. She was left in this big house. So she begged her and said, look, move closer to us, get a little flat in town and don't
Mhm.
stay there. But Ada was like fiercely independent and was like, no, I'm absolutely fine. I don't mind living alone. Ada was reported to have said that Lillian's house was big and dark and that she worried about teenagers playing pranks on her and thought that maybe that they had broken in, disturbed her, and this had resulted in like an accidental death. That I thought was a really weird thing to say because she was stabbed
Mhm.
28 times around her face and then she had
That's not
nylon stockings
accidental.
tied around her neck. I don't think that was a whoops, we accidentally broke in and hit her and she fell. That's
Mhm.
a pretty vicious, frenzied attack.
Oh, no, absolutely. That's not accidental.
So that's complete overkill to me. There's no way that it's an accident that somebody's stabbed her around
Mm-mm.
the face 28 times. And also, I don't think that's a
No.
kid. I mean, the police had agreed to look
No.
into any teenagers that she thought may be responsible. They also started looking into files of men who had recently been released from prison because they were starting to think that this may have been more than one assailant due to like the crazy nature of the case. I don't think I don't think that teenagers are going to be responsible for such a frenzied horrific attack. I could understand if they like broke in to scare her as a dare because like in our town when we were small there used to be a house that was always really like there was an old man and his daughter that lived there, and they were both really, really old. And they had like broken
Yeah.
windows, and it was dirty looking from the outside. And it was like a dare that they go in and knock on the door and ask for the time and stuff like
Right.
that. So I can understand her
Yeah.
thinking that maybe on Halloween the kids were like, "Go on, you go in and knock on the door. You go and knock on the door." But surely, I don't think teenagers are going to be like, you know, horrifically stabbing someone around the head and the face.
Yeah. No, and teenagers are gonna be like, it's not gonna turn into. It's not gonna go from, "Hey, I dare you to go knock on the door," to, "Hey, I dare you to go knock on the door," and then get inside and like choke her out with a nylon stocking, then stab her in the face and the neck, and kill her.
Yeah.
That's completely different.
I don't
So not.
understand.
I don't know.
I don't understand why they would automatically think it's teenagers. I don't understand where that's
Mhm.
come from. The police think that it's more than one person. They thought that maybe it was a prank that had gone wrong, but I
No.
can't see that
No.
line of inquiry either. Now there was actually a
I find.
murder. Oh, go on.
No, I was gonna say that I find the stalking to be interesting to me because I was sitting
Yeah,
here
yeah,
and my first question is like, where's the stocking coming from? Are they taking this off her body? Are they getting this out of a stocking drawer, or is this
yeah. I
stocking that
agree.
has come? Is this a stocking that came with them? And if
Mm,
it's a stocking that came with them, is this a was this going to be a robbery and then turned out to be a
yes.
murder?
Because remember, when people used to burgle places back in the days, they used to put stockings over their faces.
Right. Yeah. And so
And
if you
that
get to the
immediately
point
made me think
where
the same. Yeah.
yeah, if you get to the point where the robbery is now a murder, you don't need to have the stock in your face because your intention now is to kill her because you know
Yeah.
they can identify you, they know who you are, whatever it might
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
So you don't need a stock anymore. You take it off, and now you're using it as to 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 kill someone. So yeah, that's my thought is it might have been a robbery which went wrong.
There was nothing in the police reports that I read to say that the stocking, like that she had one stocking on, one stocking off. They just said that there was a nylon stocking that was tied around her neck. It was left around her neck. So I don't know what, like you say,
Hmm.
whether that's been brought with them by somebody or is that one, I mean,
Yeah,
because realistically, they're not going to go upstairs and grab a stocking out of her bedroom, come back down and then
yeah,
strangle her, So I would,
and
unless she's got it hanging up
yeah.
drying somewhere.
And let's remember, this probably happened at night, late at night. She's
Yeah.
not going to be wearing a nylon stocking.
No, no. Now, there had
Okay.
been a murder of a 71-year-old lady called Amy Barrett, and this was the year before. She had been bludgeoned to death in her home, also in Newcastle. But any connections to this murder were soon ruled out by detectives, meaning that there seemed to be no motive whatsoever for Lillian's killing. By the 4th of November, which was 3 days after, police had taken over 200 statements from local people, but still nothing was glaringly obvious as to a motive of what happened. By January 1964, over 1,600 people had been questioned. There had been a team of detectives working 18 hours a day trying to solve her murder, but eventually they had to admit that they had no idea who had murdered Lillian. There were no leads. There was no idea of motive. Now, the Chronicle, which is a local newspaper in Newcastle, asked for Northumbria police to look into Lillian's murder nowadays to see that if we could use technology now to solve Lillian's case, basically what could happen. Now, the guy that they spoke to was a former DCI called Nigel Wilkinson, and he said that if forensic technology had been correctly preserved, there was a chance that we could use the technology that we have now to solve Lillian's murder. He said this sort of forensic evidence could mean new lines of inquiry. The greatest chance of solving this case is going to be forensics. However, it's just going to be a case of whether the evidence is available for them to conduct the tests on. Now, he agreed and said it was a frenzied attack. There was a lot of blood and she defended herself, so that it's highly likely that there was DNA from her attacker at the crime scene. But because when you have a frenzied attack with a knife, the blood that's coming out of the person that you're stabbing makes the knife handle very slippery. And in a lot of cases, the person that's doing the constant stabbing actually cuts themselves. And we find that in a lot of stabbing cases that there is offender blood at the scene. However, there's a lot of blood at this scene. And like we said, you can't test every single bit. But forensically examining the stockings that were around her neck would be a good place to start, because were they her stockings like we said, in the first place? But the person would have had to have tied the stockings around her neck. Now, I understand that obviously they were very bloody, but if that person had also been stabbed at the time of stabbing her, it's very, very likely that there would be offender DNA on those stockings. But it's just whether or not Northumbria police actually kept those. So it is still an unsolved case to this day. And I'm pretty sure that because of the new cases that come up, this one is just going to get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And it's likely to stay a cold case unless there is evidence away somewhere in a box that they've kept, but not knowing what DNA was going to, not knowing what technologies would come in, I doubt very much whether they even kept anything from the scene.
Yeah, this is one of those sad cases because, like, the more the time goes past, the more or the less number of like direct relatives are around to keep the case alive and to keep pressing the police. So eventually, it is going to fall to the back burner because there's no one there to say, "Hey, you need to keep looking. We need answers."
Yeah. And obviously she didn't have any children, so there's nobody direct descendants from her fighting for this. And so it immediately made me think, oh, I bet this is going to be another one of those cases where the evidence wasn't kept, like so many that we found for something. There was a flood or there was a fire and the evidence hasn't been preserved. I read a really, really good article this week by Louise Shorter. She is very active at CrimeCom. And she heads up an Innocence Project kind of business. And I read a really good article that she wrote online about police having to have more stringent rules about preserving evidence. Now that we have the foresight to know how the DNA collection has changed in the last 30 years, we know that come the next 30 years, what's going to happen? How much more advanced are we going to be? And so we should now be mindful of cases that we can't immediately solve, to keep as much evidence as we can and to make sure that evidence is properly documented. Because if you've ever seen this is probably going to bore you to death, but this is something I find fascinating. If you've ever seen the chain of command with evidence in a murder particularly, it's really interesting. There's usually one person that is assigned the job of handling all evidence on the case. And that person sign stuff in, sign stuff out. You have to sign when that was collected, where it was collected, how it was collected, by who it was collected. Anybody that wants to see that evidence has to sign in, say when they've seen it, what they're seeing it for, are any tests being conducted, who is conducting the test, why they're conducting the test, how they're conducting the test, when and where. It's massive. The line of paperwork is huge on this, which is why somebody is just set to this as a job on that case. So if that's the case, and we know that now, there should be no excuse for future cold cases to not have stringent rules as to keeping evidence that we might not necessarily be able to test on now. Because what's going to happen in the next 30 years? How far advanced are we going to be?
Right. It's very true.
I mean, if you had spoken to these detectives at the time and said to them, in the future, we would be able to take a sample of blood, a tiny sample of blood, and we were able to tell you whether that was male, whether that was female, how old the person was, who the person, they'd be thinking, wow, that's like magic. But now it's commonplace for us.
You're great.
Juries rely on DNA now.
That's
so
crazy.
let's hope that somewhere, let's hope that somewhere in Northumbria Police, somebody finds a box, Mark Lillian, and is able to get all that tested. And I feel so sad that she's got no one fighting for her anymore. It's just like, this is a story. It happened on Halloween. I feel sad that she's got no one who's fighting to find out who did it to her. Because what if that person went on to do more? Or what if that person went on to, hurt other people?
No, absolutely.
So that was this week's case from me. So which one is the trick and which one is the true crime? We will let you know in next week's show.
So don't go Googling if you want to.
Yeah, don't cheat.
Patiently
Google.
wait and find out. No cheating. No
I resisted. I didn't Google yours this week and you didn't Google mine either. So we know.
I did not. Nope. Yep. So we know. You just have to wait patiently. 1 week. That's all. That's all. Just 1 week. Well, Cherry, how about we finish up this week's episode with a dumb criminal, Halloween dumb criminal.
Ah.
Hey, criminal, you's a dummy.
So this happened last year in New Kensington, Pennsylvania. Okay. So this was just after Halloween. It was in early November. I believe it was November 3rd. Mm-hmm. A man or a family woke up at about 5:30 a.m. where they found tire tracks on their the front lawn of their home. Okay. So they found that some sort of vehicle had crashed through their fence, drove through the yard.
Oh no.
And ended up crashing through another fence. So they crashed through really two sides of the fence and took off, right? So they called the police. The police came out to investigate to find out what happened. Police stated that they found vehicle parts scattered throughout the yard and along the route that it took, and that the fence was destroyed and cracks were found in the sidewalk. Now, serial numbers on the vehicle parts were found, which identified it as a BMW. Now, in addition to these car parts that they found in the yard, there was also a roughly a 0.3 mile long trail of fluid, which led from the home down the street to a vehicle that was found nearby, which was a white 2008 BMW X5 Sports Utility, which was registered to a man named Dylan James Lawther, who was a 21-year-old at the time. Now, in addition to the trail of fluid that led directly to the car, police actually found a orange Halloween decoration on the hood of it.
Busted.
Which had been on display at the home that had been crashed into. So obviously, the police now have the vehicle. They know who owned the vehicle.
How embarrassing.
Now, according to the police, the crash caused more than $6,250 in damage. It actually caused damage to 3 properties. So, you wouldn't be shocked to know that Dylan James Lawther ended up being arrested and charged with felony counts of criminal mischief and was issued traffic citations for reckless driving, having an expired inspection sticker, and causing an accident resulting in property damage. So he was eventually charges were filed back in March. He was released from custody on a $25,000 unsecured bond, and he was ordered to appear before a judge. So, chances are, Dylan, you were probably really drunk, which you shouldn't have been driving. You're an idiot.
Ruined someone's garden.
Yep, ruined someone's garden. You destroyed their fence, and you even though you were unwittingly a thief, you stole their Halloween decoration and you left it in your car. So, Dylan, you are a dumb criminal.
You are indeed. Thank you very much for that. So hopefully that's lightened the mood a little bit. We need to send huge condolences to Dateline's Keith Morrison, who sadly lost his stepson Matthew Perry this week. Obviously, as we all know him as Chandler Bing from Friends. There's horrible news for us all to wake up to over the weekend. So huge condolences to Keith and his wife and their family. So we're very sorry to hear that. So our true crime family losing their family is horrible, and we all send our love and best wishes to them. So we will be back next week with another episode for you. We'll also give you the answer to this week's episode, who was the trick and who was the true crime. So for now, keep an eye out on our socials. Let us know who you think. I'll put a poll up so that we can guess and see, and then we can read that out in next week's episode and see who got it right. Good. So I'll keep that. I'll put the poll up this week when we release this episode. So for now, stay safe this Halloween, guys. Happy Halloween. Be nice, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, yeah. Bye.